in the rhythm like a stone from the grave, from the wood to the mic, wet paving the way.
Two brothers talking, yeah, we're walking the walk.
Faith on the beat, real talk, no chalk. Bounce to the truth, let the speakers unlock. Two voices, one mission to spark. Light in the dark like a flame in the park. Two brothers talking, let the journey embark.
All right. I think we are good to go. We're live. And we are two brothers talking still. Fortunately.
Still talking. Still two brothers.
Yeah, I do proclaim to be a brother, so and I'm talking.
Yeah.
So I feel like my label's right.
Did you drink coffee?
I'm drinking coffee. If I didn't get that cup of coffee, we would not have a good episode.
Two brothers doing something else.
It would have been bad.
Yep.
Would have been bad all around. Well, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Ready for this Christmas season to come on.
Okay. Why are you doing good?
I'm doing good because with Christmas, I get to spend time with more of my family, and it's gonna be kind of it's not like the same Christmas, when you have really young kids and you're buying gifts and you're trying to catch all the sales and stuff. Now Christmas is kind of like, it's a lot slower. It's more peaceful. It's time with family. And so that's why it's good times right now. I like the season.
Yeah. I do enjoy the season too. I think for all the reasons you just said. And then also I feel like two things happen to me during these seasons. Typically, like one of them is opportunities tend to come up in this season for some reason. Like, and I think opportunities tend to come up because of the second thing, which is I think this season gives people time to think. It gives me time to think, time to reflect, time to think about the year and decisions and outcomes and what I'm looking for next year. As far as what I feel like I need to go out and pursue, what I feel like I need to give, to you, to people around me, to, strangers, to people at work, to obviously my family at home, what I need to like give, pour out, next year that maybe I could have poured out differently, or I need to pour out more of. So, and then also like makes me reflect on self. Same thing. Like, what do I need to pour out to myself? So this is a good time for reflection, and I think that's probably my favorite part of this season. And that does make this season sometimes a little fun. Sometimes it makes it challenging, or both. But I think that's kind of par for the course.
So you kind of start that up in December. I know a lot of people do that in January, where it's like the new year. New goals, new vision. You kind of started towards the end of this year?
Yeah, I actually started in November.
Okay.
So Thanksgiving is usually my marker to start, getting more active with my notes about all those things I just mentioned.
That's good. Yeah. That's good.
So I try to start in December, or in November rather, just around Thanksgiving or before, and then I let it flow into December. And maybe first week or two of January. And then at that point, like the main parts of the things that I've set out for 2026, for instance, they're already locked in.
Gotcha.
They're already locked in. So this is a good time all around, and a good time for the topic that we're going to talk about today too. I thought the topic that you proposed for today was really timely. And that's why I went with it hook, line, and sinker. I had no pushback at all. And that topic, for those that are watching or that will watch, that topic is the blueprint, spiritual leadership in the home. And this is, you talk about things that you want to do better or want to do different, or you'd like to experience in the new year. Like this is probably about as important as it gets. What you experience at work. Like all of those things, which you experience, with maybe extended family outside of your home, those things are all, they're all important, but they're not near as important as what you do in your house. They're just not. And they're so the lifelong lasting impacts of what we do in our house is what makes that so. So maybe just to kick us off, since you had proposed the topic, I feel like you have a real good vision of like why this was important to you. Can before we dive in, can you share a little bit about like why this topic resonated with you so much, just so folks know, why this was so heavy on you?
Yeah, I think like you kind of along the lines of what you just mentioned is that it's very, very important, and it probably gets neglected in a lot of homes in different seasons. Sometimes you have seasons where you're locked in spiritually and you're leading your home well, and then you have these seasons where you're not. But it's probably one of the most important things that we do as men, as believers in Christ. It's very important. I think, when you talk about like the Great Commission and sharing your faith and things of that nature, it's like if you start in your home, you immediately have impact on the next generation.
Right.
Like, as a person who used to be a pastor, you kind of place hyper focus on being in a pulpit. But like what I do with my children exponentially probably is more important. Because like I can go preach a sermon or something, and them people not gonna remember it 30 minutes from when they leave that building. That's the reality of it. What I do with my kids and my family on a daily basis is gonna stick with them from a lifetime, good or bad. So that's one reason why this topic is important to me.
Got it. Yeah, I kind of thought my interpretation of the topic was I think on par with what you were thinking. And I guess the only thing that maybe is a little different is I think today and our usual target audience is men, right? More so than anybody. But although I'd say probably most of our topics are gender agnostic. But and I think this one is too. And that's probably the biggest difference is I think about like there's lots of roles of spiritual leadership in the house, and all of those roles are not owned by the man.
Gotcha.
And I, like there's, God has called children to be spiritual leaders in their homes where maybe there wasn't, leadership. And he's worked through those children to be that, as an example. So I just think, I'm looking forward to this discussion. I'll put it that way. Cause I think that all the different roles of spiritual leadership in the house are really important. And there's not anyone exempt from some responsibility in that respect.
Good point.
Mm-hmm. So when we like, we typically will do our kind of 3-pronged approach to keep things structured and consistent. So we'll kind of define exactly what we're talking about, what we mean by spiritual leadership. So I'm going to come to you and ask you that question in a second, and then we'll dig into a little bit more, than the surface level of like how it shows up when you have it or you don't in the house, and why it matters in like a real life scenario. We'll talk a little bit about some of our maybe core elements to a blueprint, and like our thoughts on that. And none of this, for anybody who watches this or is watching, like none of this is really intended to be like the overly churchy, I don't know, have another word to say it, but like the overly churchy version of this conversation. It's not meant to be like the perfect home or the perfect man. It's meant to be real and what really happens, today, and how you can find still real ownership and goodness in that spiritual leadership, in your house, while not necessarily being a pastor or being a Bible expert. So that's not the point, because frankly, 99% of the folks that are in the world, like, they probably aren't those things. As far as being like, you've read the Bible back and forth, you understand it all. Like, nobody understands it all. So we want to talk to you real, and then we'll wrap up with like the tools. How what are some of the tools that we can talk through and maybe hopefully put out there that help somebody. So why don't we come back to that, Mark, at the top with how would you define spiritual leadership in this context?
Yeah, so for me, I think how I would define spiritual leadership is, I'm leading. There are people following me, following my lead, And the way that I'm leading is based on my spiritual, I'll just say spiritual toolbox, spiritual tools, all these non-tangible things. So I'm leading based off my spiritual understanding. I'm leading based on my relationship with God and what I believe He wants or desires. I'm leading based on my discernment. So like it's all these kind of non-tangible ways which I'm leading other people, or other people are following me through life. So in the context of our home, that means like I'm making decisions um, from a spiritual place as opposed to simply from a practical, natural understanding. Because like in the natural, things can look a certain way, and in the spiritual realm could be like something totally different. And so when I go to make decisions for my home, what I'm saying is I'm leading also from a spiritual place, so that I'm probably going to need to acknowledge God in everything that I do, because my five senses alone and my own wisdom is not enough to deal with the world that is natural and spiritual all at the same time.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking about it pretty similarly. I would say that probably the are you hearing a little bit of feedback or no?
I am hearing feedback.
Seemed like.
Did you hear it when I was talking?
Oh, it looks like it might be. It might have been on your side on the mic. Like it sounded like typing maybe a little bit. All right, I'm gonna mute Mark for a second until he's able to get back on. But I guess just to keep us going, like Mark gave his definition, and I think that aligned mostly with how I was thinking about it. But like spiritual leadership on another, like a more simple perspective. Spiritual leadership on a more simple perspective in my mind is really centered about one, how well do you follow, right? I think to be a really good leader, you have to be great at following. You good? All right. I feel like we're in a AT&T T-Mobile commercial right now. Let's see here. All right. So yeah, I feel like the spiritual leadership piece is in the home starts with like, how well do you follow? Are you following? Are you an example of somebody who's following a routine that at a set of beliefs that are consistent and clear with the Bible? Are you following some other set of beliefs? Like how well do you follow before you get into leadership and you start talking about what sounds like glory of the role? Like you got to first be able to give away all glory. Like to be the best leaders in my life that I've been around, no matter what format, your home, work, or like whatever it is, church, they all have been great followers, and they've been able to showcase, understanding of the word and an understanding of what it takes to be humble, and to showcase like humility and love and grace toward people. And since they could do that, then they almost like position themselves to be followed as leaders. So that's one way I kind of look at it. And then the other way is really centered around like once you've done that part, when you do get people following you, whether it's your wife or your husband or your children, or colleagues at work or friends, when they follow you, do they, are they seeing what you intended for them to see, and is what they're seeing really you? Like that. So it's kind of like, are you a good follower? Is what people choose to follow you for consistent, and is that really you, or are you just faking it? Right? Like there's a lot of, I think I've been around plenty of people, whether in every environment, where it's like I can tell that their real walk isn't what they say it is, right? And that walk is for likes and for accolades and to be followed, but they don't want to do the following, right, by actually walking the walk. And when you can follow a value set, you're going to walk the walk. And I think that's probably the most important part of leadership is that you actually showcase the walk. And I guess the last thing I would say too about leadership is in the home. I feel like leadership in the home is basically like really focused on being secure and being a common force. So are you the type where you are in the room and people get more excitable and more anxious, or are you the type where you basically get to a place where you make everyone else around you like excitable in a negative way? So leadership to me also has a sense of calm and stability about it. Like your leaders tend to be, one way I've heard it said is leaders make the weather in their environments, and then the followers kind of get the umbrellas out and adapt to the weather. Like that's so in different in your home, you should be making the weather, and everybody's accountable to make the weather. Like it's not just the man's job. Like sometimes the woman in the house needs to do that. Sometimes the child in the house, once they get to a certain age and understanding, they need to not actively try to create bad weather. Like they need to create good weather, and they only do that when they see that demonstrated in front of them, right? So Mark, I don't know if you were able to hear that while you were kind of cutting in and out, and I cannot unmute you either. So looks like you might be having some technical problems, but I'll leave you in while we kind of move forward, just in the sake of time. So we talked about, we just kind of defined like what leadership looks like in the house. Mark, I can hear you now.
I'm here, Burrell. Do you think it's on my end or is it on yours, or is it the platform?
So far the platform and me have been on and good. So basically I think like now we kind of shift into basically why this matters and what's behind like the day-to-day impact of spiritual leadership in the house, or maybe the lack thereof. I think like just a short and honest look at how this shows up in a really bad way. You're going to have in the house, you're going to have confusion. Confusion in the sense of like, what are we doing? Like, what are we about? Who are we? You're going to have what I would refer to as this level of anxiety that's maybe a bit undefined. So you've got basically a scenario where you've got people in the house who are just unsure, and that uncertainty makes them very anxious and makes them maybe a little volatile. You've also got situations where maybe people are rudderless. Like a ship has a rudder, and the rudder, those of you who don't get that analogy, like the rudder kind of determines where a ship goes and in which direction. They might feel rudderless, like they don't really have a direction in the house. And everyone in the house I'm talking about, like the man, woman, child, like that doesn't matter. Single family, like single mom, single dad family, all of that applies. I think the other way it shows up too is you've got just really bad behavior in the home. So that could, I think in its simplest form, that shows up in the way people talk to each other. So do you have people using profanity at each other? Like, do you have people having conversations that are highly charged when they shouldn't be? Do you have folks maybe talking to each other in a condescending way versus solving problems together? Do you have people in the house or in the family that are avoiding one another? Like this like kind of an approach of where they know that there are things that need to be dealt with, but they just don't deal with them. Do you have people in the house that are greedy, that keep all of their resources for themselves, and everybody's kind of out for them, but nobody's out for the whole, right? And that those are elements of a lacking spiritual leadership guardrail or a guidepost. And that's really all spiritual leadership is. It's a guidepost. Like it's not a ironclad set of rules, because you could try to run your house like a kingdom, but let me tell you that doesn't work. Like, it's your house is just an extension of God's kingdom. So it's not your kingdom, it's his, and your job is to lead it, if you're in it, and in whatever role you have. Like, that's the job. So those are some examples of how I think it shows up where you don't have spiritual leadership in the house. And then I guess maybe if to take that the furthest step, you're going to have situations where you've got really destructive behavior in the house, whether that's violence, drugs, alcoholism, and having all those things in the house might be a sign of a lacking of spiritual leadership. But at the same time, you can actually rebuke those things out of your house with spiritual leadership. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And I've seen a lot of that personally. So I could speak to it from personal experience. I know it's not easy, but it is possible, and it is worth it. And you don't have to have some miracle cure. That's the miracle is the leadership, right? So you just have to be willing to follow. And then once you are following Christ, you're following God, and you have a clear path to what it is you want to represent and who you are and who you want to be, then you can implement that in your house. And I would say you have to have you probably want to have, you don't have to have, but you probably want to have a structure to do that, especially if your structure up to that point didn't include heavy spiritual leadership. So in your home, there's a tumultuous, heaviness about the way that spiritual leadership can show up. And if you don't have a structure in place where you've got you maybe even written it down, where there's kind of three main things that are important to you about your spiritual leadership or about how you operate your home, it's going to be hard for you to deal with the turbulence of weather and the occasional kind of figurative tornadoes that happen in all of our lives. Is all those things will throw you topsy-turvy, and you won't stick with the leadership, or you won't follow the leadership if if that leadership is already present, and it'll show kind of the worst of us. So it's good to be aligned, at least with the adults in the house. It's good to be aligned with hey, this is the way we operate in our home, and that in itself is leadership, right? It's having a set of boundaries or values allows everyone to lead, and that's what real leadership looks like. If you have a set of boundaries and values that you're aligned on, everyone can lead at that point. It's not just one person's job; it's everybody's job. It's I don't know that I've ever shared this before, but it's like the football fumble analogy. When things are tough, or when things happen that are unexpected, nobody expects a fumble on the football field. But there's not a designated fumble getter. There's not somebody that has a title where it's wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end, fumble recovery. That's not the way it is. Everybody's the fumble recovery person. So if you have the set of values that allows everybody to be ready for that fumble, day to day, then that's a really good position to put your household in, and put your friend group in, or put your coworkers, like your teams in. But it really shows up at the house. And if you can get everyone to understand that concept, that we're all equally responsible to attack that fumble and to recover that ball for each other, to work for each other, that goes a long way. It just takes some time to get that really understood across a home, especially in a home where there hasn't been that. So it requires a lot of patience and a lot of grace and love toward the people that are around you. I think that Mark had a couple of pillars, and while he's kind of challenging or figuring out the challenge with the technical side, the pillars behind the spiritual leadership in the home, and that blueprint that they use that word that we were starting with. My pillars were kind of threefold. They were really simple. One of them is presence. So just showing up emotionally and spiritually open, showing up kind of ready to care, to love, to apply grace, to be clear, to be vulnerable. And that vulnerability creates trust in the home, especially out of men, because we all know men, we aren't we aren't vulnerable typically. We usually don't share. When we share with an agenda. You know, when we share what seems to be vulnerably, it's usually from a place of like, I want you to see me a certain way, so I am doing this. It's not usually from a place of like, that's authentically who I am, and I'm doing it because I care. I want nothing back. I don't have an agenda, and I don't know that we're always as self-aware as we need to be to really recognize that. So one is like kind of showing up and being present emotionally and spiritually and vulnerably, and doing so with no agenda. And you got to really reflect on that first one. That first one sounds easy. It's really hard. It's really hard because frankly, like humans are always looking at an end game. Like there's something we want or something we don't want, and we let that guide how we lead or how we show up. And our presence is important. It's really important. The other one is like practice. So I think like the daily habits that we have define our leadership or lack thereof. And those habits are, you know, how do you start your day? Like, are you a person that has a routine, you know, that involves some discipline, self-discipline? Are you a person that has a routine that involves self-care? You know, a person that has a routine that involves the active care of others. Like you don't wait for them to need something, especially in your house. You are seeking out, you know, the status of everybody in your home. Like, are you good? You know, are you really good? What's going on with you? You know, I love you. How can I help you? Like that's, you know, I want the best for you. Even if that means to my detriment, I want the best for you. You know, and that's I think very difficult also. Right. If your presence is there, though, a presence precedes the practice. So if your presence is there and the way you're showing up has no agenda, other than to just, you know, to be there for your family and loved ones, then the practice part, you know, really just determines how much of an anchor in the home you are. Like, okay, you're present now. What does your presence do? Right. What does your presence do? Your agendas are clear. Your intent is clear. But now, what do you do? And practice is the action part, you know, of the equation. If you want to equate it to sports, you know, I'm sure anybody who's listening to this has heard this 1,000 times. You know, the best ability for any athlete, especially professionals, is availability. Like, so presence is always going to precede everything else. But then, like, skill and capabilities is next. So that practice part is going to really be determined based on, you know, how much effort you're willing to put in. Are you willing to seek out like other ways to showcase, you know, your leadership, or to showcase that you don't know what to practice and you need help on what to practice? Like everybody who plays a sport, somebody who's starting to play soccer doesn't necessarily know what drills to practice, right? So you might have to go seek out some help to understand those things, and that's okay, and that's a sign of your vulnerable presence, because if you're not vulnerable, you won't seek out any help. Right. So the third part, I feel, you know, just personal opinion, I felt was important around the blueprint of leadership in the home, spiritual leadership in the home, particularly, is really about protection. So there's this like, there's an energy in the home that is yours to protect. And then there's a value system in the home that's yours to own and to protect. And then there's the the general atmosphere of the home that I feel like is sometimes really difficult to protect. And the atmosphere and the energy in the home is something that's so intangible. You might not always see the status of that. Like you might not always know how the atmosphere is doing or how the energy is in the house, but it's really important to understand that, because the energy and those little crevices in the barrier around your home, that spiritual barrier around your home, those little crevices is how things start to crumble, right? Like your kid is up in the room, your kid doesn't ever come out of their room. You let them stay in that room, and their door's always closed. They're cut off from the world, and now they're in there happy one day playing video games or whatever they're doing on their phone, you know, talking to their buddies and having a good time. And then, you know, 2 days later, because you haven't really gone in the room, or you don't want to be that parent. So now you've allowed them to develop this cocoon And in that cocoon can enter all types of things into the house, right? And now, you fast forward a couple of weeks, your kids got this terrible, really crappy attitude, and you're wondering like why, or they're avoiding, interacting with anybody in the house altogether, and you're wondering why, or they're isolated, they're sad, they are loud with their friends and mumble and grumble around their siblings or you, or around other family. That's not healthy. That's a sign something's wrong. And don't let any kid of any age tell you it's not. Like, that's a sign that something's wrong. And if something wrong might not be that, like, they're doing anything wrong. It may just be that something's wrong with the integrity of the home spiritually, and they need help. So a leader is got to go in there with no agenda, not trying to be right, not trying to be the big dog and be the dad or the mom, like trying to, you're gonna do it my way. Not with that energy, but with the energy of, hey, I love you. I can tell something's going on. You don't have to talk to me right now, but at some point we need to deal with it, and I want to help you. So when you're ready, you need to come out of your cocoon. And if that lasts for a while and they don't, I'll speak from personal experience. Sometimes you have to be the unpopular one, and that's part of leadership. You have to be the one that says, hey, no more door closed, man. You might not realize it yet, but being cut off from the world is not good for you. Isolation is not what humans were meant to experience. God wanted us to fellowship. He doesn't want us to be isolated. Satan attacks us in isolation often. Now, when God leads you to temporary isolation so that you can pray and meditate, that's a different thing. But when it happens for weeks and weeks and weeks, and their attitude is really poor, and they're not engaging, they're avoiding, they're snappy, that's not what God is not leading that, in my opinion. That's just not what's happening. So you have to be willing to be unpopular, and you have to be willing to maybe say the thing they're not going to like. And that might mean, hey man, this door stays open, or hey, for dinner, like you need to come out of your room with everybody else, and you need to come downstairs and eat. And if you don't want to talk, fine, but just presence. It takes them back to your presence, right? And if they can just be in your presence for a while, and you have the right leadership energy and agenda, they'll come out of it. But you can't force it, and that's also part of leadership. Is like you're setting a value system and a goal and an outcome, but you can't like force it all to make it happen. That's that's a dictatorship. It's not like real spiritual leadership. So there's some balance there, and I wanted to use that as a real example of something that all of us with kids have experienced or are experiencing right now. And you have to be willing to without being mean or angry, you have to put that anger aside and put love in its place and grace in its place. And love and grace are also firm. Love and grace are not soft, right? Love and grace are also firm, and they come with some boundaries. And that's part of spiritual leadership and part of protecting the sanctity of your home. So just to recap that, like the core blueprint, if you will, that I'm proposing for you to think about is your presence, how you show up spiritually, emotionally. It's basically the weather that you're creating, right? The practice, like, do you have daily habits that showcase your value system, that anchor the home, that encourage others to demonstrate those same things, and also protection. So when are you protecting and guarding the atmosphere, the values, and the energy of your home, right? And just to be real clear, like, of your home, I'm referring to wherever your family is. It's not the house or the apartment or the townhome or the duplex or the shack, or it's not any of that. It's wherever your family is. Are you protecting that, right? And the job of doing that changes over time. As your kids get, my kids are all getting older. So 2 adults and 1 about to be an adult. So it's like they're all certainly getting up in age where my leadership role is different. And how I mess it up is also very different sometimes. But it is, it does morph and change over the years. And that leads us in a place. It goes back to like good leaders or good followers. You have to be a seeker of information, a seeker of like, how do I lead better? How do I lead now that my kids are 25, 22, and 19 versus how I led when they were 10, 13 and 16. Like, am I leading the right way? Right. And having those, being able to question yourself, really reflect on it, that vulnerability, it starts with self. Right. And when you can do that, and if you have the gift of articulation, if you can share that emotional journey with your kids, it will like be one of the best leadership tools you could ever have, because they might veer here and there, but like they'll come back around, they'll pick it up, because you've not just told them, they didn't just like watch you go from point A to point Z and like, oh well, mom and dad got there, wow, like they look at them now, but that looked easy. Like, no, it's not easy, and you kind of have to tell them why it's not easy, as they can understand it. So how you share that with a 5-year-old is different than how you share that with a 30-year-old. But nevertheless, I think you kind of get that point. So some of the ways like that you can, like tools that you can, go and apply or assess your spiritual leadership in your home with. So I'll lay a few of those out based on kind of what me and Mark talked about. So number one, I would say one tool is just reflection. So if you can write down, just it's on a note, sticky note, anything. If you can write down the values, let's call it 3 to 5 values that you hold dear, right? Then write those down. If you can't easily write those down, if it takes you all day, it's that they're probably not values you operate with. Just being frank. Like, it's probably not what you do every day. And that's okay. This part of it is understanding that. So take a moment, write down the 3 to 5 core values of spiritual, of leadership and just values, just general values that you hold dear in your home, or that you would like to hold dear in your home. As you write those down, now, this is the hard part. Assess yourself and get your significant other to assess those values too. Now you just opened up a can. So you're writing down the 3 to 5 values that you hold dear. I'll give you an example of what one of those could be. One of those could be, it could be, that we follow the word of God. It could be that we always demonstrate love to each other, no matter what. It could be that, like my siblings and my spouse come before me. It could be like, those are all examples. I'm not saying those are your values, but those are all examples. So as you write those down, because they're specific, then now grade them yourself. And now, without showing your grades, get your significant other to grade them without being influenced by your numbers. 1 to 5, 5 being I demonstrate these consistently every single day, or we demonstrate these consistently every single day in the house. 1 being I don't demonstrate them at all, or this is a new value. There's no bad rating. The only quote unquote bad rating would be that you don't do it. Right? You don't rate. Like, rate it. It's okay. Rate it. You can't make it better if you don't know what the status is of it today. So just rate it. And as you rate it, get your significant other. And if your kids are old enough where you think they can, add some value to that rating, and they don't have to be that old to do that, like, ask them, hey, these are the values that I think are important, or I think we should operate with. Can you give me an honest grade of how you think we operate with these things and why? Right? So that's the start. That's the tool. The second tool that I would encourage to really improve the leadership of the home, spiritual leadership of the home, is to openly seek out Christ. And if your spiritual North Star is the Bible and the Word, then make sure that that's how you're showing up. Like go and be the best follower that you can be, by seeking the Word. And if you can do that in itself, just by osmosis and the word magic that it works on all of us, you just reading it, getting closer to God, having a relationship, it is going to change how you show up, and it'll change that presence part. Emotionally and spiritually, you will be stronger, and everybody in your home will benefit from that, right? And then that'll show up in your habits. The last thing actually relates to the habits. The last thing is identify some simple, when you think about like those 3 to 5 values, under those, write down some examples of how those things show up in practice every day. What are the daily habits where you think that would show up? I'll give you an example. So I mentioned that one of your values is, we love and follow Christ, and the word of God is our our North Star. Okay. So then if that's the case, then now are you like, what are the practice points? Are you reading every morning? A verse or a Bible chapter? Do you have a group of people that you work with or that you are friends with that you talk about, the word, and you guys read together and you discuss periodically? Do you watch, videos? If reading is not your jam, do you watch certain types of videos that help explain the word? Do you go to church? Do you worship in some other way? Right? Like those are practices. Do you talk, and when you think about in the home, do you discuss the Bible and the word with your family in a constructive way? Right? Not in a know-it-all way, not in a beat you over the head with it way, not in an argumentative way, in an actual seeking to understand and an openness, a listening kind of way. Or do you an empathetic way? Do you do that? Right? Those are all practice points and great examples of how you can showcase that value. So hopefully those things, those tools will help along the way. And I'll wrap us up. So I know we're right at time. Apologies for us having some technical difficulties, but we powered through it. We didn't let it change our weather. We brought the weather. And hopefully you saw that. And that was, to me, in reflection, that was a good opportunity to showcase some spiritual leadership in itself. So thank you for joining this morning. I hope that those that watch this get a chance to really digest, the meaning behind it, apply it to their homes. There's a lot more in spiritual leadership in the home, but I'm thankful to get the opportunity to share, and I hope that blesses somebody. We'll catch you on the flip side. Thank you. Have a good weekend.